This is episode 19 of Hoops Forum, a production of Radius Athletics and a Quick Timeout podcast. I'm Tony Miller, and my co-host Randy Sherman is back with us this week. Good to have you back, Randy.
Thank you, man. Good to be here. Excited to talk this morning.
Yeah. Before we get into things today, big thanks to 323 Sports for sponsoring Hoops Forum. My first basketball camp begins next week, so camp season is officially here. And there's still time to get your camp t-shirts in, though, if you're looking to still get some of those for your campers. Your players will love the 323 Sports Moisture Management one-color print tees, only $6.99 a piece. To find out more about those, either visit 323sports.com or contact sales at 323sports.com. They'll be sure to do it right for your sports camp and for your sports program. We have a new series that we're starting this week here in the month of June. We'll see how long it goes, probably at least during the June, probably in July as well. We're going to be addressing the cognitive biases and how they relate to coaching. So we'll start with that. Just a very simple question, Randy. What are the cognitive biases? And without getting too detailed right now, how are they connected to our coaching?
Yeah, okay. So a little background on this. First of all, cognitive biases are part of an academic domain called behavioral economics. I'm not an expert in this field. That's my first disclaimer. I'm definitely not. It's something I've read quite a lot about. I have some experience when I was in college on a debate team that we studied these because that's sort of a way to defeat an opponent, is to sort of ensnare them in their thinking, which is a little off. So that's my surface level background of this stuff. But I would say as quickly and succinctly as I can that a cognitive bias is a thinking error. It's a method that we use to make decisions that could be called faulty. There's several different of them. There's several different cognitive biases, but in short, I would say they're thinking errors.
Do you have them there with you? Do you have the list there with you?
Yeah, I can call it up pretty quick. Yeah.
Why don't you just kind of quickly go through? I mean, you don't have to explain each one of them today, but I do want people to know kind of like where we're going, and then that'll lead us into this first we're going to do.
Yeah, I would say you may have heard of some of these if you've done some reading around thinking and decision making and mental models and things like that. But I would say you've probably heard of survivorship bias, confirmation bias. Those two play I see those in a lot of coaching talk and coach speak sometimes. Outcome bias, which would be, judging a decision based on its outcome. Like the classic example would be like maybe someone's a little bit drunk and they drive, they make it home. So the outcome was good, right? Like, hey, I'm fine. But like, was that a good decision, right? Like, so they devaluate the decision based on the outcome, not the quality of the decision itself. There's sort of optimism bias, which I call sort of bright side thinking, and action bias, which is sort of the bias that says that like we kind of always got to be doing something to fix issues, right? So instead of sort of standing pat or seeing standing pat as an option. That's a brief summary of that one. But and we'll get, as we go through the series this month and this summer, we'll talk about maybe not all of these, but many of these in more detail. But today, I think we're going to talk about choice supportive bias.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and talk about what that is, the details of it, and this is where you can kind of dig down a little bit deeper. And then how do we identify it in our coaching? Because I think that's really what we're concerned with here is how does this apply to us particularly, and how do where are the different areas that we could potentially be showing this type of bias?
Yeah. Let's start with the definition. This is one I think I pulled from some research, so it's not my own. It's the tendency for a decision maker to defend his or her own decision or to later rate it better than it was simply because he or she made the decision. So I'll put that in some layman's terms. It's maybe like our tendency to cling too hard to one of our own ideas. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like, or or one of our own decisions, that we cling too hard to it because we sometimes tie our identity into our intelligence, and one of the marks of intelligence is our belief that we're good decision makers, right? So if I hold myself to be a smart, rational person, I make a decision, ergo the decision is good because I'm smart and rational. But when the evidence, after I've put that decision into the marketplace, into competition, tells me that that wasn't a great decision, I cling to it because I believe it's good because I made it.
This is going to be, you and I were mentioning this beforehand, but this is going to be for coaches. It might be difficult to identify where this is actually happening because we have for so long said you need to stick to what you believe in. Can that sometimes be faulty?
I think so. I think there's something about experience and a trained eye to know whether it's time to press forward through some growing pains or just completely kick a decision to the curb, saying, and like, yeah, never mind, let's move on from that. That takes some experience. There is something to be said for a leader that is stubborn, who is perseverant, who does persevere, who, no, we can do this. We just need more time. We need more practice. We need more reps or whatever. That's a tough call. That's why they say you get paid the big bucks, right? Like that's a tough call. And I think as a decision maker, there's a time to stay true to what your end vision is, and then there's a time to quickly move on. And only through experience can you ascertain when is when, right?
For coaches that may still trying to identify where can I sometimes show this bias as you worked with your coach, what maybe are some of the common ways in which this brings itself forth or shows itself?
Yeah, I think that's a good question because there are symptoms to look for. Just like if you had a disease, that some symptoms might present themselves, and the doctor has to sort of like sort through those symptoms and run through a checklist to determine to maybe make an accurate diagnosis, right? So if you find yourself like defending decisions, like coming up with like talking points to sort of justify a decision, like let me think of an example. Like, I don't know, maybe you bought like a new car or something, and that car, you get it off the lot and it ends up sort of being a lemon, right? And you don't want to look bad to your wife, to your buddies who you bragged about, I got this new car, and a month later it's in the shop or something, and you're like, you kind of like, you think of things to say to defend that, like, well, it was a great deal, or like, that you get what I'm saying? Like, you think of like, your mind starts to think of justifications or rationale rather than just saying, yeah, man, I really got hoodwinked there by the car salesman, like that, and I'm just going to sell this thing before I sink more money into it, right? So I think that's one symptom. If you find yourself sort of like coming up with these creative talking points to defend a decision, and in your own internal, in your heart of hearts, that you're just coming up with things to save face. That's a symptom. I would say another symptom would be downplaying, where you've made a decision of like, oh, we're gonna start this player at point guard. I'm gonna, instead of this guy, right, or this girl, we're gonna start this player, and you put them out there, and the first game just doesn't go so well. Maybe the first couple of games don't go so well, and like maybe there's you start to, well, she's not that bad. They only had like 6 turnovers. That's not bad, is it? You start to sort of downplay the negative that you're experiencing, because you don't want to say, yeah, that was a bad move. Like that was a bad move, and just move on. I think those are two big time symptoms. So just listen to your own voice and what the things you're saying, and monitor your thinking, and have someone in your life, whether that's me, an assistant, or somebody who can kind of go, yeah, you sound like you're downplaying there a little bit, or who can sort of check you on these things. And I would ask any coach is like, what is holding you back from admitting a decision was bad? Well, like, what is that thing? Like I don't want to play like amateur psychologist or anything, but like, what is in you that is making you defend and downplay, when empirical evidence, vision, our eyeballs are telling us that this was a bad call or a bad choice? What's making you defend this decision? That's really at the crux of it. Like, why are we downplaying this decision?
I know for some coaches that the answer to that probably could be ego. Although it doesn't necessarily have to come from a bad place. Like we said, you may just feel like, I was taught that I need to stick with this, and I need to, persevere, and that's gonna figure itself out in the end. But like, yeah, right. And I'll come back to the rest of that in a second. But like, what if we don't correct those things, or we don't address those things, or we don't allow somebody to talk to us about those things, or to change our thinking about those things? What are some of the negative long-term effects, in particular for basketball coaches?
Yeah, I would say that I would call that phenomenon entrenchment. Or I wouldn't call it. That's what it is called, entrenchment, where I've become entrenched in my position. I'm not. No matter how bad this gets, no matter what my staff or assistants is telling me, I've become entrenched in my position, and now it's become less about the players, the organization, the program, and more about me saving face and winning the argument, right? Like if we made a decision to play zone and it's just not working, it's just not we're not good at it. What we're trying is not it. What for whatever reason. But I am entrenched in that position, and it's less about like me now. The motive has gone from I want the zone to work so we win games and get stops, to I want it to work so I'll be right. And I'll scoreboard my assistant coach is telling me like, no, man, we need to pivot from this, right? I think that's the main harmful effect, is that when a decision maker becomes entrenched, it becomes more about them than the team or the program. And it becomes more about, I guess, like winning the argument than progress and performance.
I can remember back to a couple of these instances where I don't know that this came through, but it was kind of almost on the brink of it. I remember one team we introduced a new offense to, and it's like, we're going to run this, and you get several weeks, and then it becomes a couple months into the season, and it's like, this isn't working. And I can almost sometimes, speaking on behalf of coaches, it's not that we're attempting to be biased. It's just you almost feel the pressure of it's too late to do something else. We just have to persevere and go through this. And
I think you do have to sort of recognize whether you're in like a dip of performance, like okay, we're in a learning curve here, that we're in a low point and we're struggling to process this new information and execute this offense, to use your example, or whether it's just a bad decision. And I've helped coaches with this over the years since I've been counseling coaches, and I do say I probably lean more to the side of like, no, stick with it. Like you can do it. Like you just, give it more times, more time, more reps, more another season, another month, or whatever. I do say I probably lean toward that side rather than like just punting on a decision just at the first sign of struggle.
Mm-hmm.
Here's one example of how I thought that I stumbled upon this helping a coach one time and this almost touches on a bias that we'll talk about in the coming weeks of outcome bias. But like, I'm helping this coach and he's not having a great season in terms of win and losses, but this coach is a great teacher. I can tell he's a great teacher. I'm watching his film with him, and his team is like, they're executing the thing correctly. You get what I'm saying? Like their players on film looks like the diagram, right? Like they're not just out there getting disrupted by the defense, and it's not just wild basketball. Like they're going through option one, through option two, get here, take the shot, and the shot doesn't go in. So that to me was like, all right, that maybe is a way that we can form something as sort of like a litmus test for whether we're ready to move on and kick this to the curb or stick with it. The thing was working as it should, but his players didn't have the skills to pay it off, right? Mm-hmm. Like if we just evaluated what was happening on the court based on the execution, the adherence, the shot quality it was generating, it would get all A's during in those categories. But I just felt like, man, you need to stick with it and keep building these skills in your players, because you're obviously a good teacher. The things you're teaching are transferring to the court. It's just that your players is just missing these shots because they're not talented enough. Let's keep improving their skills. Let's replace them with better players when they graduate. I don't know if that's right or not, but or if that's great advice or not, because that's not an immediate solution. But that's one way I sort of stumbled on a way to evaluate this thing. Like if we can say, yeah, we're doing this as it's meant to function, but we're still not, then can I really call it bad? Mm-hmm. Or are my inputs bad? Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm. But and on the counter to that, someone would argue, well, if your offense is generating shots that your players can't make, it's not good. I can get behind that thinking too. So yeah, tough one.
And for us, back to my example, it was that I don't know that the personnel that we had was fit for the kind of offense that we were running. And to go further your point, I can drill down into basically two ways with that. One, do they not fit because they're not skilled, because I haven't taught them how to be successful within this offense and having the skills that they need? Mm-hmm. Or do they genuinely, for us, by the time they get to college, they're kind of, to an extent, the players, the base of the players they're going to be. Mm-hmm. And to another, take that further, just the physical makeup of some of them didn't suit this kind of offense.
Yeah.
So like you said, I think the point is like to dig deeper a little bit. And that leads me to the last thing, like some practical ways to avoid this. And as you've been speaking, I think the easiest one that I can think of, based off of some things that you've said, and then also that I've seen you write about before, we've talked about being kind of more data driven, like what is actually working, rather than even us sitting in the coach's chair watching what's happening on the court. What's actually, is this something that's not actually working, or is it actually working according to what the data shows us? So things like that. Is there anything else that can help us avoid this type of bias?
That's a great first step. Would be we can know these things now. We don't have to have hunches or misconceptions. We can know these things. So that's a great first step. Would be, if we've made a decision for a strategy or a tactic, we can immediately, when we put that into the field of competition or the court, we can immediately start to evaluate the quality of that decision empirically. I would say another thing would be that the fatal flaw to me of choice supportive bias would be we sometimes tend to stop thinking about a decision after it's made. I stop evaluating a decision after it's made. Let me rephrase that. Like, we think a lot about it before we made it. I'm in this time of the year with coaches where it's spring, summer, inevitably they're wanting to maybe try some new things with their team. They're in research mode and learning about a new offense, a new defense, or so on and so forth. They're thinking a lot about it before the decision, and trying to make that decision right before they put it into the field, right? So then once it's made and we get to playing, do we continue to evaluate that decision? So that would be my biggest piece of advice, would be after we've made the decision, are we evaluating that decision any longer, or have we just that's decisions made and moved on? I think I have an example in the article I wrote about this of, like, we made a decision to play a compact, tight defense, whether that's man or zone, like gaps or sitting in the paint, just, and we did that, and we made that decision as an organization, or this hypothetical team made this decision, and it's air quotes working. Like, we're getting wins, we're getting stops. But maybe if I continue to evaluate that decision, it's only working because opponents are missing wide open shots. So can we say it's working? What happens when we play the best team in our league who's got good shooting and good? Are we sure it's working? Because that's what I wanted to avoid, was like, oh, we're winning, so it's working. Instead of, like, being skeptical about our success. Like, okay, I think that's sort of the way I hear like scientists and academics sort of speak. I'm neither of those, so I don't want to pretend to be. But when I hear a scientist speak, they don't. Yeah, this will work, guaranteed. They don't talk that way. They really don't. And when something starts to show promise, they're skeptical. Like, okay, wait, this looks like it could be working, but it could be this factor. It could be this variable. It could be that. Like, they're almost more reluctant than, like, an amateur to say, yeah, great idea, that works great. They're very reluctant to do that. And I would try to adopt that quality as a coach and a decision maker, of, like, all right, we made a decision, looks promising. I'm encouraged by the results, but let's keep evaluating that thing.
That's probably why it's also, you've said this before, it's a good thing to have fresh eyes, people from the outside who maybe can watch film, or give you some feedback, or simply, this is the importance of having a network of coaching friends who you can show them clips and, what do you think about this? Why do you think it's not working? Why? Just to give you, again, some fresh perspective, because I know even your coaching staff, once you get inside that room, sometimes you just start bouncing things off of each other and off the walls, and it sometimes doesn't make sense, or sometimes you get biased, which I'm sure will lead us to another bias.
I would say another almost like mantra to adopt as an organization is the best idea wins. The best idea wins. Who came up with it doesn't matter. What if it's different than what we taught yesterday or the day before or last month or something, we kind of got to get over that, and, like, the best idea wins, and just adopting that mentality that it's kind of a cliche, but, like, if we don't care who gets the credit for the idea, like, I think we can go further as a group, right? Like, as an organization, of, like, if the janitor in the school had a good idea, like, take it. If you had, as the head coach, have the best idea, that's not always the case. No one's perfect in that regard. So taking the mantra as an organization of the best idea wins, no matter who gives it, no matter where it came from, if that's what we think it is, we're taking it and moving on. And
Good.
if we're in a bad place with a decision, the best idea in the room might be, Coach, we got to move on from that.
Yeah. I'll put you on the spot here. Where do you think is a good place to go from this? So to talk about possibly for next week, is there anything that builds on this? Or I know you brought up the optimism bias. Is there something maybe closely related to this?
I think outcome bias would be a natural segue from this. We kind of already touched on it today, because it's like, okay, is this working?
Mm-hmm.
Or is it just giving me the outcome I want? Like the example I gave of a team who maybe made a decision to play like a tightly compact defense. They're getting wins because of that. On the surface, that's working. But is it working because they're good at it, or is it working because the teams they're playing are bad? That would be if I just blindly accepted that, oh, that worked, great decision, I'm falling prey to outcome bias.
Okay, so there's a preview for you for next. Yeah, okay. Well, that's a preview for you for next week. We'll be talking outcome bias next week.
Awesome.
Appreciate all of those who joined us this week. If you missed any part of the show, you can go back and watch the full episodes on the Radius Athletics YouTube page. You can find that by just searching YouTube Radius Athletics. Randy's also got some other phenomenal videos. Lost myself in a couple the other night, and so I plan to do that again here pretty soon. Or you can go listen to the full audio. It's released a week after we record it live here on Twitter. You can search any podcast platform, a quick timeout, and you'll see there the audio version of the show. Thanks for tuning in. Appreciate Randy, all he does and all he shares for us. We'll talk to you again next week on Hoops Forum.